Let's move over to Who's Eatin' Good, served by Applebee's. Applebee's is doing their part to honor those who have served our country on Veterans Day. So for the 16th straight year, all veterans and active duty military can enjoy a free meal this Saturday at your nearest Applebee's. Choose from multiple popular entrees, including a chicken tender platter or a 6-ounce top sirloin. And add to the over 11 million meals Applebee's has contributed. So, well done, Applebee's, by the way. Well done. Who's eating good?
I salute that. That's great. I don't think there's ever, you can't do too much. You can't over-support our veterans, our military, by the way, also their families, their loved ones, past and present. You cannot do that too much. So much love to Applebee's. Appreciate that, I did not serve, but I had many family members who did, and, anyway, I appreciate that from Applebee's. That's very cool. May I suggest the riblets and the Dollaritas?
I'm surprised you passed on the chicken tender platter. I think they made that for you in the ad read.
Well, my point is that if everyone else eats the riblets, more chicken tenders for me.
Nah, scheming.
Duh.
Scheming.
I'm playing chess while you're playing checkers over here, Connor.
That's kind of how the show goes. I'm always one step behind.
I'm just saying.
All right.
Oh, boy.
Who better to start with, Lawrence, on Who's Eating Good than CJ Stroud right now? And after a weekend where he comes away with almost 42 fantasy points, Stroud has been an absolute monster, especially at home for a rookie quarterback this season. And for Barry, he comes in as QB6 this week. Do you agree that Stroud can stay hot and be a QB1?
Yeah, I got him at quarterback 5, actually. And we all liked him last week in the matchup versus Tampa. I don't know if we liked them this much. When you put up numbers like this, it doesn't matter who you play. The numbers are the numbers. That shot him up to quarterback 3 on the season on a points per game basis. It's his first game with 20 fantasy points since week 4. And the 2 games before that, he didn't even throw the ball 30 times. So I think now they're just going to get back to that volume passing offense. Not a great running team. Now you go up against the Bengals, who've been the 31st best or the second to least best passing defense since week 6. So they could definitely do something there. So I like them to eat good versus the Bengals. I like him to eat good going forward. By far, obviously, he's in the seat for Rookie of the Year. And if he beats the Bengals, if they win this game, right, Texans go to 5-4. The Bengals will have 4 losses as well, right? So do we start talking about a rookie quarterback for MVP? If you go on the road to Cincinnati, beat Joe Burrow and them who've been hot, and you come away with the win, if they win, it's going to be because C.J. Stroud was a dog again. So do we talk about that if they get that W?
I don't think he's going to win MVP over guys like Mahomes and Lamar, but I think he could absolutely get on the ballot.
Just in the conversation.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
He could be a top 5 MVP candidate by year's end. And the thing with Stroud, and it's been this way all season, when you give him a clean pocket, he is as good as anyone. And with Tunsil back, with Titus Howard back, they have more just weapons on the offensive line. They're keeping him clean. And when he goes up against teams that don't have a pass rush, he just eviscerates them. Now, the Bengals have Trey Hendrickson, Sam Hubbard. They have a decent pass rush. But I think Stroud should still have success. And he's just a lock. You just have to start him every single week now.
Right. He comes in at QB6 for me this week as well. And I don't think anyone drafted C.J. Stroud to be their starting quarterback in fantasy this year. Now, maybe you've been using him because you lost Kirk Cousins, what have it. But chances are you have another viable quarterback on your team. And what I'm telling you here, and I've been saying this a while, for C.J. Stroud, do I think 470 and 5 touchdowns every week? Of course I don't. But do I think he's a viable QB1 the rest of the way? Absolutely. To your point, Lawrence, they can't run the ball. And their defense, while it's shown improvements, it's still, teams can move the ball against them, so they're having to throw to keep up in games. And it's clearly that they are willing to be aggressive, especially given the fact of how well Stroud has played, how well Nico Collins and Tank Dell and Noah Brown and Dalton Schultz have all come together.
Yeah,
They have weapons. So, based on the success, you expect this to keep coming. I will say this. When he's played at home this year, he's averaging 24.8 fantasy points per game. 3 of his next 4 are at home. He's got the tough game on the road at Cincinnati, but to your point, the Bengals are 24th against the pass over the last month. So it's not as scary a matchup as you might think on paper. 3 of the next 4 opponents are Arizona, Jacksonville, and Denver. Those are the 3 home games after this Bengals game. they're all bottom 10 in terms of most fantasy points allowed to opposing quarterbacks. So CJ Stroud is somebody who should not only remain a top 10 fantasy quarterback, but gives you some flexibility if you don't have a tight end, if you need help at running back, if you're looking for another 2 wide receiver. I would have no problem trading a Lamar Jackson, a Josh Allen, a Justin Herbert, one of these elite guys, a Mahomes. I would have no problem trading one of those guys and just rolling with CJ Stroud as my quarterback the rest of the way.
Because you'll get more for those bigger name guys.
Correct.
Right? Yes.
And I think he is a top 10 fantasy quarterback the rest of the way.
I'm in that exact situation. That's why I just said something about it. Yeah, I actually have Lamar and C.J. Stroud. C.J. Stroud was sitting nicely on that bench while my boy Lamar didn't get me no touchdowns. But, maybe I'll consider that.
C.J. Stroud's been better than Lamar the last couple of weeks. I mean, and I get it because Stroud was QB 15 over the previous 3 games coming into that game against Tampa Bay. But still, Lamar has been a much better real-life NFL quarterback recently than he has been a fantasy quarterback, and he's the bigger name. You'll get more in the trade market for Jackson than you will Stroud.
Yeah, I might also go the other way too, where I think Lamar's about to explode statistically because they don't have an easy game the rest of the season. They have the hardest schedule in football, and he's going to have to start doing Lamar stuff the rest of the year, I think. So I think that he's going to explode, and someone who might have Lamar as their quarterback is like, is this guy just going to be playing in blowouts and putting up 180 passing yards and no touchdowns? That's not going to happen.
By the way, I'm in the middle. I'm doing Matthew stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't think those thoughts are inconsistent with the other ones.
Yeah.
What we're saying is if you have CJ Stroud and somebody else,
you'll get more regardless.
Yep.
You'll get more with a bigger name quarterback than you will Stroud. And we're saying Stroud is in that level of being a viable QB1 the rest of the way. And I don't mind the idea of trying to buy low on Lamar Jackson for sure.
We've had a similar conversation on this show recently about our next one in Rashad White, who comes in as a top 15 running back for Barry this week. White, Jay, has simply been an extremely effective receiving back, and that's set his floor when you combine the volume week in and week out.
Connor, Rashad White doesn't have a single rush this season of over 16 yards. He's had 112 carries and not one has gone for more than 16 yards. So when I look at things that are unsustainable in terms of rushing production, I look at what Justin Fields did last year, where he just kept on ripping off 70-yard touchdown runs for fun. That's not sustainable. What Rashad White is doing, I think, is sustainable because it's just sheer volume and it's working the passing game. So I think Rashad White is here to stay. I think that the fact that he had this massive game while averaging 3.7 yards per carry is very symbolic. And look, he's not going to be super exciting. It's going to be ugly, but he just gets so many receptions and gets that work that he's just going to provide value.
Just to give some stats that echo exactly what you're saying in terms of volume, 80% of the snaps through the last 4 games. In terms of the passing game involvement, at least 4 receptions and 45 receiving yards in all 3 of his previous games as well, where he's been the 7th best running back in fantasy.
Yep.
Last 3 weeks, he's the 7th best running back in fantasy. I'm at running back 13 this week. You don't love the matchup with Tennessee. Titans have played really good defense, but again, those short passes, that Alvin Kamara, that cheap Alvin Kamara type stuff that just keeps you afloat, is in play for Rashad White.
Yeah, and here's the thing, Lawrence, too, is that so he's been targeted 34 times in the passing game. He has 33 receptions. These are not complicated routes that he might just drop a few. No, they're just all dump-offs. They're all dump-offs, and so he catches every single one of them, basically.
Yeah, and if you, again, like I said, volume is key. His season high for rushing yards is only 73. You don't love that for any starting running back, but he had a season high 24 touches in this matchup in Week 9 versus Houston. So you have to kind of just picture hey, what if he doesn't score a touchdown or he doesn't score 2 touchdowns? Well, you could kind of lean on, well, hell, he's going to give me 5 receptions and maybe one of them he'll break away like he did versus Houston, which it'll be harder to do versus Tennessee, who they face next, and San Francisco. But, just trust the volume like we do with Tony Pollard.
And the key is, if he gets 5 reception dump-offs for 1 yard apiece, that's just as good as a Derrick Henry 50-yard rush. They all count the same. And so in PPR, he's a monster.
Exactly. Our final one here, Matthew, Jahan Dotson, who slow start to the season, but Washington throws the ball at an insane rate. And over the last couple of weeks, the volume has returned for Dotson.
He has. The concern here on Dotson is that the volume has returned because Curtis Samuel's been out, right? He didn't play in Week 9. He played under 20% of the snaps in Week 8 before he left with an injury. And in those games, he's gotten 14 slot targets, which is where Samuel lines up a lot. So he's basically taking a lot of the volume that Curtis Samuel's had. Curtis Samuel might be back this week, and so that's the concern. the positives here is that while he's gotten more work over the last 3 games, 8 targets at least in each of the last 3 games where he's averaging 17 fantasy points per game, he's produced. He's been producing, right? He's getting targets and he's producing. As we said, he's averaging 17 points. My only concern, though, is 2 things. What if Curtis Samuel comes back this week? And also, you don't love the matchup with Seattle since week 4. Seahawks allow the 4th fewest fantasy points to opposing wide receiver. It's a really strong secondary there. That said, their defense is so bad, and they can't run the ball. Right. So they have to keep throwing. I mean, I feel like the easiest bet in betting, Jay, over the last month has just been the over on whatever Sam Howell's passing attempts are.
100%. And by virtue of that as well, the over on Terry McLaurin and Jahan Dotson's receiving yards, because I think a really key thing here is that it seemed like in the Philly game, the Commanders made a conscious decision. It's like, all right, we're using our tight ends more. We're just getting more protection for Sam Howell, and we're using these 2 guys on the outside. And there's such a concentration to those 2 wide receivers that I think that Jahan Dotson, who was looking pretty dicey for at the start of the year, I think he's back as a guy who's going to give you 60, 65 yards and a chance of a touchdown each week.
The only concern is Curtis Samuel, and does Eric Bieniemy go, hey,
Yeah, Curtis Samuel, 3 of his last 4 games, he had at least 7 targets, right? So there is some worry, but he hasn't had games like the last 2 that Jahan Dotson has provided. And going back to their passive value, Sam Howell's thrown it 41 times in 5 of the last 6 games. The last 3 games, he's averaging 46 attempts. So I think you can welcome back Curtis Samuel in open arms. I don't think they'll ever have a game again where it's 8 dudes getting 5 receptions. I think it's crazy after seeing what Dotson has done the past 2 weeks.
Hopefully to your point that, Eric Bieniemy says, okay, yeah, we're done with the Byron Pringle, Jamison Crowder.
These are first-round pick.
They was eating good for a week.
Exactly. Jahan Dotson was a first-round pick.
Pringle's back in the box, please.
Yes. There we go, Jay.
Look at Jay. Look at Jay.
Little giggle from Blake in the background.
Yeah, when you mention Pringles, makes me hungry.
Okay. That's a wrap on Who's Eating Good, served by Applebee's. Obviously, these guys think that good things ahead still for C.J. Stroud, Rashad White, and we'll keep an eye on Jahan Dotson with more Curtis Samuel in the future. The appetizer for fantasy football pregame on Sunday morning at 11 a.m. with Matthew J. Lawrence and Michael Smith is Big Ten Saturday night. Watch number 1 Ohio State continue their quest for a college football playoff berth when they host Michigan State at the Horseshoe. Coverage begins at 7 p.m. Eastern, only on NBC and Peacock. We're taking
Ohio State's favored by 4 touchdowns. I don't think that's enough. By the way, I think my favorite team in college football is whoever's playing Michigan State. Let's go Buckeyes!
There we go. We're taking our first break. When we're back, of course, a little start, sit with Keep It Open or Close It Out.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and RotoWorld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest RotoWorld fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.